Hello, I'm here to ask you a favour before we begin this episode. I would really appreciate it if you could vote for Real Life Ghost Stories in the British Podcast Awards. Just go to britishpodcastawards.com/voting to cast your vote. You can vote once per email address and you have to verify your vote via email for it to count. It genuinely takes 30 seconds and you can vote from anywhere in the world. Am I likely to win? No. But do I enjoy turning a look at an event? Yes. And on a genuine note, it is such good free advertising for the podcast to have the name up there. So if you've enjoyed the podcast, if I've kept you company on a long journey, if I lull you to sleep at night with my dulcet tones, I would really appreciate if you could cast a little vote for Real Life Ghost Stories. And also, please do vote for any other indie podcasts that you listen to. The place to vote is britishpodcastawards.com/voting.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot, we charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Welcome to mini episode 379 of Real Life Ghost Stories, and I have 4 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from July the 20th, 2024, and story number 1 comes from Lauren. I forgot to include this with my last story, but I have had an OBE, an out-of-body experience. It was nothing crazy, but I almost lost my shit after the experience. Most nights I wake up to go to the bathroom, but about 50% of the time I can't go back to sleep until daybreak, so I lay in bed and think or play on my phone. This is usually around 3 a.m. and then I doze off again at around 5 a.m. One night this was the case, and I was lying in bed, pondering things for a while, and eventually I felt my body start to really relax. I was in that in-between state of sleep where you're not quite awake but not quite asleep. But I remember my body starting to vibrate or hum. I felt like a tingling all over and I could hear the humming as well. Kind of like an electrical hum, I guess. The next instant I was against the ceiling looking down at myself, but I couldn't go anywhere because it was like there was a net over me. I remember literally being hunched like this stretchy net was tightly constricting my movement. In the next instant I opened my eyes. I googled extensively after I woke up and found out what I had just experienced was an OBE. I've tried a few times to prompt it again, but I just fall asleep. Maybe the net is a good thing though, because I'm a bit afraid of what might happen if I'm actually able to freely roam. Most likely because of Insidious. Yeah, Insidious scared a lot of people. Myself included. The soundtrack, the songs in Insidious, the Tiptoe Through the Tulip song absolutely scared the shit out of me. And in some ways, I'm kind of envious of people who are able to astral project or do the whole out-of-body experience thing at nighttime. But also, I appreciate your fear of it, because I would be simultaneously kind of impressed with myself and terrified if I found myself having an out-of-body experience. From what I can remember, I do think there are ways that you can induce some out-of-body experiences. There are definitely like specific meditations out there that are supposed to help with inducing out-of-body experiences at nighttime, etc., etc. I would look into it for sure. And story number 2 comes from Gannon. My first story is of one night at our new 50-year-old house. I was laying in bed one night while my parents were downstairs watching a movie. I couldn't sleep, and I noticed my dog jump up out of a deep sleep. I didn't think anything of it until out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. So I sat up and saw my door swinging back and forth, slowly. I sat there frozen as I watched my door speed up until it went so fast my dog started growling. I screamed for my mom, and it slowly swung fully shut. When my mom came up, I told her to shut the door and watch it. Nothing happened, and to this day she doesn't believe me. I've no idea what it was. Here's another one that happened. About a month ago I was at my friend's and we were all hanging out downstairs. Her parents were running to the store. Me and my friend were playing with her younger siblings. Her sister, all of a sudden, said she heard noises upstairs. I thought she was knocking on the wall, but then we heard it. It sounded like there was someone with heavy boots stomping around upstairs. Everyone, including the pets, were downstairs. We all went outside until her dad got there. We still don't know what it was. It's always the dogs, isn't it? It's when the dog jumps up and starts growling. That's when you know that shit is real. That's when you know it isn't a draft or your imagination. And I think if I remember rightly that the first part of this story was from Gannon's friend's perspective who lives in the house, and then the second part was Gannon visiting the house, I think. So if I'm remembering that correctly, all of this has happened in the same house. And swinging doors and boots stomping around upstairs, etc., that feels like something trying to get your attention or somebody trying to scare you. I don't know which is worse, to be honest. And story number 3 comes from Jacquelien. I was born in 1984 and my teenage years were pre-internet. The things that made me a believer were in my teens, and I couldn't go on the internet and Google what was happening. When I would talk about it, people would call me creepy and thought that I was making it up. Okay, I couldn't blame them because I had a lively imagination and would tell spooky stories from time to time. But I became a believer in the afterlife when I was a teenager. It started in my childhood home where I regularly heard the stairs creaking like someone was coming upstairs, and where I heard my name being called from downstairs more than once. My bedroom was in the attic, and that was the way that I would be called when dinner was ready or when I was needed. So I reacted more than once when I heard my name being called, but there was no one there. I didn't think anything of it and thought that I was imagining things. But then there was a series of events happening that made me a believer. I don't know why, but when I grew up, 1 o'clock at night was the witching hour, and I believed it. I made sure that I would be asleep before then. One night, my radio started playing at 00:59, and a few seconds later stopped when the clock showed 1 o'clock. I had been fast asleep when this happened. I was spooked, but I also thought that I imagined it. A couple of days later, at the same exact time, my faucet started running, and again it stopped at 1 o'clock. But now there was something that I could investigate. I looked at my sink and knew that I wasn't imagining things this time, because the sink was wet. I was really scared now. The whole week after that, I was scared to fall asleep. I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't want anything else to happen either. One night I woke at 00:59 and I knew something would happen again. My bed stood against a wall and something ran its fingers across the wall. It wasn't the sound of mice or a bird that was sitting on my roof. It sounded human. There is no other way that I can explain it. And I wanted an explanation so bad because I was terrified. Somehow, I could say out loud that it succeeded. I believed and I was terrified, so please stop scaring me this much. That was the last time that anything big happened in that house, but I always felt on edge. When I started seeing someone, I eventually told him that I believed in ghosts and what happened to me. When you're planning to live together, you should let him know that you're possibly bringing some extra roommates. Luckily for me, he was a believer too. He thought there was a chance that he would bring some spirits home as well because of his job. He was a plumber and he had to go under people's houses occasionally. More than once he found some bones, and not all of them were from animals. We bought a new built home and naively thought that it would be spirit free because there was no leftover energy from former residents. Unfortunately, I soon realised that I had the same on-edge feeling in our new house that I had been feeling in my childhood home. and soon little things would start happening. Curtains started to move in a weird way while there was no wind. Our cats did what cats do when there are spirits present, and more than once I saw shadows. But there was one incident that freaked us both out. We were in bed and all of a sudden, the whole left side of the bedroom went black. And I don't mean like it was dark. No, it was black. If I would have dared to move my hand, I believed that I wouldn't see it. My boyfriend asked if I was seeing it too, and the only thing that I could say is for him to shut up, and then it was gone. We were both shocked by this. I want to share one more story, and for me it is a happy story. I had a rough life, and it had a great impact on my mental health. 4 years ago I decided that I had enough of my relationship and that it was time to leave. It wasn't an easy decision after a relationship of 16 years, but I had to. We had 3 cats and we decided that I would take one with me because she didn't get along with one other cat. After several moves and my mental health spiraling to a really low point, we finally made it to the house that I'm currently living in. The only thing that kept me going was my cat. The thought that she needed me made me get out of bed every day. Last year she reached the age of 16. Unfortunately, she became ill and I had a really hard decision to make. The vet gave me an extra week with her by giving her some medication that would give her a short time of relief. In that week, I had not 1, but 2 cats in my home. I would see a cat walk in the corner of my eye, but when I would look straight at it, there wouldn't be a cat. I would feel a cat jump on my bed, but I knew that wasn't possible because I shut my door. My bed was too high for my cat to jump on, and I didn't want her to hurt herself. I believe that the spirit of my former cat that I had left with my ex was with us to tell me it was okay to let her go and that she would take care of her. After that week, I decided that I had to let her go. I had some visits from her shortly after her passing, and I know that I made the right decision. I'm currently living alone, and I took 2 cats in that were used to breed cats and who are now too old to have kittens. Luckily for me, they don't see spirits, and the house feels peaceful. Hopefully my spirit days are over. If not, I will let you know. I hope for your sake too that the spirit days are over, because you just don't need that in your life. I love the honesty in the beginning of like, yeah, okay, had a lively imagination and I would tell spooky stories from time to time, but I did have some weird stuff happen to me also. 2 things can definitely be true at the same time. And I understand why you would feel like, you know, hearing creaks on the stairs and hearing your name being called in isolation, those events, you'd probably be like, oh yeah, fuck it, it's probably just my imagination, it's probably not real, I'm not particularly worried about it. But then when those things happen in conjunction with something else, it starts to feel a little bit less like you're imagining things. And I wonder if whatever was in the house was trying to get your attention. So creaks on the stairs didn't work, and calling your name didn't work because you weren't frightened, you didn't really react to it. You went and checked, realised there was nobody there, and you were like, oh yeah, whatever, probably fine, just imagine it, don't worry about it. And then whatever it was had to like up the ante, you know. And if you already believed that 1 a.m. was like the witching hour, was this entity somehow aware of that and able to therefore manipulate your belief that already existed? Or maybe I'm just giving these entities way too much credit. Whatever the case may be, there certainly seems to have been an escalation in events, you know. The clock coming on, and then the faucet coming on, and then the fingernails across the wall. That would shit me up for sure. And it must have been such a horrible feeling when you had that same feeling in your new home that you had in your childhood home. And it has freaked me out that you've talked about the whole left side of the bedroom going black. I only talked recently on the podcast about how that happened to me, not in this house and not in my last house, the house before that I lived in, and both Dan and I witnessed it, and it was very strange and very unnerving, and I still don't quite understand what it was. So I feel you on that one, okay? I've been there. It's strange and unpleasant, and I don't understand how it happened. And I am glad for you that you made the decision to leave the relationship if it was not working for you. I can imagine that after 16 years you're thinking, but I've put 16 years into this, but if it's not working for you, you got to get out. And you did that, and you should be really proud of yourself. And it is funny when you have little pets, you don't realise how much they keep you afloat until everything goes tits up. When everything falls apart and you feel like I don't have a reason to get up in the morning, having a pet gives you that reason, and they sort of keep you alive in that way. It's incredible. I'm very sorry that you lost her, and I can assure you, you absolutely did make the right decision in letting her go. But it's very lovely to think that your previous cat came back to say, hey, I'm here, I'm going to look after her, you don't need to worry.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
And our final story today comes from Daddy Boi. I'm 18 years old and I work the second shift at this place that coats airplane parts. I don't have a car, so I bought an electric bike to make the trip from home to work and vice versa. It's about a 4-mile trip from home to work, averaging about 25 minutes of riding. Now going to work at 2:30 p.m, it's pretty lively outside, nothing scary besides some people who don't know how to drive every once in a while. Going home at 11 p.m. is a different story. No sound, the only light being the small one I have on my bike to see, and occasional traffic lights, barely any cars. It's creepy, but I'm not one to fear the dark, so though I'm a little on edge, I'm not really scared on the ride home. Until just about a month ago. I'd said goodbye to everyone at work and I left the building on my bike. I listen to music in my earbuds while I ride, so I hit shuffle and start the journey home. I'm about halfway home when I hit a 4-way intersection. There are no cars, so I didn't have to press the pedestrian crossing button. I had to cross the street in front of me, turn right, and then cross that street, turn left, and continue down the sidewalk over there. So I crossed the first street, stop, and turn right. I saw a car coming up the road I had to cross, so I had to wait. While I'm waiting, the pedestrian crossing screen displayed the picture of a man walking, meaning someone pressed the button. It wasn't the button by me that was pressed, so I looked across the street where I came from. I didn't see anyone, though it was fairly dark over there, and this obviously creeped me the fuck out. But I calmed myself down and tell myself that it's probably detected me or something and pressed itself so I could cross legally. The car had finally passed and I crossed the second street. I was just about to hit the sidewalk when this pedestrian light switches to the walking man symbol. I again turn around, and this time there was better light on the road. Still nothing. Now I'm freaking out a little on the inside. I turn back ahead of me and a car is coming up the street to my right. They're turning into the road that I just crossed. I think nothing of it. Even though the pedestrian crossing symbol was still on, there was obviously no one there. And I didn't follow traffic laws at night, so why should they? So I start riding home again. Not even 3 seconds after I started moving, I heard a car suddenly press its brakes as it made a screeching sound. The car halted and stopped in the middle of the road right in front of where the pedestrians cross. Then they started aggressively honking their horn. I stopped and turned to see what they were honking at and if it was me. There was no one in front of them. They were honking their horn at nothing. Then they stopped honking. The pedestrian crossing screen showed a hand, which means don't cross, and the car started driving down the street and out of sight. This was my sign to get the fuck out of there, and I just zoomed down the sidewalk. I hit 2 more intersections on the way home and nothing like that happened again, and it hasn't happened since. And now I'm scared of the ride from work to home. The worst part about it is it's only a 1/4 mile away from a side of the road gravestone that I pass every ride. More specifically, a cross with flowers and a picture of someone. So I don't think it's crazy to think those are connected. Regardless, the spirit, if it was paranormal, didn't seem to be an evil one. But I also have no proof that it's a good one either. So now I'm constantly looking over my shoulder when I ride home, waiting to see someone. I cannot wait to have a car. So, do you know what this story reminded me of? And I'm not saying it's not paranormal, but recently we had an episode where a girl went to her friend's house, rang the doorbell, could hear the TV on inside, yada, 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 and the friend didn't open the door, right? But then her friend had been opening the door and the friend wasn't outside. Like they had, I don't know, gone to different dimensions or something. This kind of gives me that vibe. As though in some other dimension, somebody was using the pedestrian crossing and pressing the buttons and obviously making the green man signal and crossing the road, etc., etc. And something happened with this car that they, I don't know, saw the person that was in the other dimension. I mean, equally, is it paranormal? Potentially. Is it potentially the person whose roadside grave it is that is pressing the pedestrian button to get cars to slow down? That's why they're doing it and you just happened to witness it. That feels like a much more palatable reason than anything like dark or malevolent. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Lauren, Gannon, Jacquelien and Daddy Boi for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from July the 20th, 2024. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.